You are hunting, late evening, mountain forest, returning to the car, and suddenly, on the left, behind the trees, a flashlight moves. Not a glimmer, not a reflection, but a clear light that follows you. You stop. He does too. You shout. No one answers. A minute later, the light disappears. And again, silence. What will you do? Will you go check it out? Or will you get in your car and drive away? One of them went. The other stayed to wait. And after 40 minutes, only one returned. No shoes. Covered in blood. Says he heard his brother's voice, but not where it should be. Now tell me, what would you think if a third person came to their camp a day later, in official clothes but without a name, and with a token dated 1979? The calendar showed October 3rd, 1993, a Sunday. Hunting season was approaching its peak in the Gunnison National Forest, Colorado. Autumn comes abruptly there. The air is thick, humid, and the forest itself seems desolate. That day, the Clay brothers, Todd and Jason, came to an area called Cleaver Ridge. The place was unofficial, with no direct entrance, and people went there only by old coordinates that were kept in personal records. Regular maps no longer showed this trail. But for those who had been hunting there since the 1980s, it was normal practice. The brothers knew the area well. Their father had taken them there since they were children. They had one rifle, a couple of radios, a thermos, and a GPS tracker tied to Todd. They left at dawn. They planned to return before sunset. In early October, it gets dark in those parts quickly and abruptly. Around 7:30 p.m., they reached the car. It was getting dark. Jason loaded up his backpack and put the thermos on the hood, while Todd scanned the western tree line to see if the deer they had seen that morning had returned. And then, beyond the creek, deep in the woods, a light came on. Flashlight. Judging by the movements, it is a human. It moves parallel, almost without hesitation. The height is normal, like when walking, doesn't jump, doesn't swing, just light. But here's what's strange. No sounds, no steps, no branches, no water. At first they thought it was another hunter. They screamed. No response. The light continued to move. Todd stepped toward the creek, holding the flashlight to maximum. The light in the forest stopped, stood there, then suddenly went out, and there was complete silence. This is where it all started, according to Jason. Todd said, "I'll just pop in and see who it is." And he went, without a backpack, without a rifle, only a radio and a flashlight. Jason remained waiting by the car. About 10 minutes later, he stepped forward to shine a light in that direction. No one. Then he turned on the radio, calling his brother, hissing, and nothing. He tried channel 2, empty. 5 minutes later, another short glimmer of light on the other side of the stream. This time, further and higher than the previous point. And again, no steps. He shouted, and in response, only an echo, no voices, no wind. Only a reflected, "Hey," and that too as if alien. 30 minutes later, Todd hasn't returned. The radio is silent. Jason starts to get nervous. He turns to the car and hears the door slam. The flash of the flashlight. Empty. No one. The backpack is still there. Everything is in place, but the rear passenger door is slightly open, although he definitely closed it. He grabs his rifle, walks around the car, no tracks. The ground is loose, the leaves are fresh and damp, but no trace of a shoe, no heel, no paw. Here, Jason says a phrase that he will later repeat during interrogation and in an interview. I realized that it was no longer a question of hunting. It was a question of who was after whom. He began calling Todd differently, not loudly, but in a whisper, almost automatically. He held the light of the flashlight down. He glanced back periodically, as if someone might come out from the hood. The radio was still silent. Almost an hour passed, and then, at about 8:40, Todd appeared in the bushes. No flashlight, no shoes, face covered in bruises, hands in blood. Jason shouted, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he simply dropped to his knees and whispered, "You were there, just not there, not on this side. I heard you, but I didn't see you." And then someone else. He was disoriented, cold, and spoke in fragments. He repeated that he was called by name, but not in the way he was used to, and that the route he took led back, but not to where the car was. And then he just fell silent. And only a day later, they found out that he had only walked half a mile along the arc. It was as if he was walking around someone who was moving nearby. Sapphire Bay, Gunnison County, is a small place. With a population of less than 1,500, everyone knows everyone. And the Clay brothers were especially well known. Todd, the eldest, 34, worked for the Forest Service, not as a ranger, but as a contractor, clearing logging roads, setting up temporary towers, marking seasonal trails. Jason, the youngest by 5 years, worked at the gas station at the entrance to town, worked as a mechanic, and was known as a guy with a good hand on old Chevys. Their father, Jim Clay, was a Vietnam veteran, strict, taciturn, but respected. He took his sons into the woods from an early age, not as a trophy hunt, but as a lesson. They knew how to read terrain, pick out tracks, judge direction in fog. On the wall of their house was an old Army map of the woods, all of Gunnison hand-marked. Some of it predated digital mapping. That is, if anyone could avoid getting lost, it was them. That's why, when the disappearance story happened, no one in Sapphire Bay talked about a mistake. On the contrary, conversations began. If this happened to Todd, then there was something wrong in the forest. The brothers often went together, one with a rifle, the other with binoculars. They trusted each other. Todd had a habit of making marks on trees, thin, unnoticeable, with a knife on the bark. This was from the time of their father. If you go alone, leave a trail, but not an obvious one. After that night, when Todd came back, bleeding and shoeless, his behavior changed. The next day, he did not come to the hospital. Only the sheriff spoke to him. According to the report, his condition is stable, but mentally disoriented with elements of paranoia. He continued to say that Jason was on the wrong side and that he heard another voice, very close, but not human in tempo. When asked what he meant by not human, he replied, "He knew my name, but he said it as if he was trying it for the first time. This phrase was not included in the official protocol. They wrote it more simply: voice in the dark, source unknown. Later, when they took off his clothes, they found a piece of fabric in his left pocket, most likely cut with a knife. The structure was that of an old-style army uniform. No markings, no stripes. There was no explanation as to where he got it from. Jason himself said that he didn't go into the forest. He just stood by the car. But at some point, according to him, he felt something moving synchronously behind him. When he turned his head, everything froze. But steps. He heard steps, as if someone was walking 10 feet away and deliberately not showing themselves. When Todd came back, the first thing he did was look into his brother's eyes for a long time, and then he said, "If you hadn't answered right away, I wouldn't have known whether it was you or not." This had never happened to him before. The city didn't discuss it loudly, but after this incident, several people, including a former district police officer and a local electrician, refused to work in the southwestern zone of the forest. They said, "Well, we won't go there even with a map." It was there, according to old plans, that one of the temporary observation points was located, which was closed in 1979. Few people knew about it. But the token that was found the next day, the same nameless one, was from that year. The day after the incident, Monday, October 4th, the Clay brothers were taken to a local medical center. Todd had superficial abrasions, brush scratches, clay marks on his palms and shins, as if he had crawled. He was not wearing shoes. His tracks disappeared in the creek area, where he saw the flashlight. And there began what was not officially recorded, but was verbally confirmed by several participants in the search. The volunteer group that arrived to help was the first to head for Castle Fork Creek. Along its bed, at the supposed crossing point, they found only one barefoot print. Left, the heel was deepened, the toe was not. The ground there was sticky, with some silt, but distinct. This is strange. If a person walked barefoot, there should be at least a second one, or a bounce, but nothing. One print, a single one. A dog handler named Phil Thorne, who arrived with his German Shepherd Maddie, noticed the dog's behavior. She followed the trail from the car, reached the creek, stood at the bank, and howled. She did not respond to the command, "Search," did not go further. She just froze, as if in front of her was not just the edge of the water, but something that she did not want to cross. Todd later confirmed he was crossing the creek. He said he saw movement in the bushes on the opposite side. He described the silhouette, a man in a hood without a flashlight, standing with his back turned and seemed to be listening to something. When Todd tried to call out, he did not turn around. But when Todd took a step forward, he disappeared. He did not run. He did not jump. He simply disappeared from view, as if he had been switched off. Jason was at the car at the time. He says he didn't leave, but one of the volunteers, a former Army man, later recalled seeing a light from a flashlight on the opposite side of the creek. So, if you believe the words, 2 flashlights were moving at the same time, in different directions, with an interval of half a minute. It couldn't have been one person, and definitely not one of the brothers. Later, when examining the stones by the stream, they found a thin There's nothing nearby, no blood, no bag, no gear, just one scrap of cloth. It is unknown where he came from. Neither Todd nor Jason wore such clothes. Already in the evening, when the main part of the zone was combed, one of the volunteers, Steve Milton, climbed a hill 200 yards from the stream. He took binoculars with him, and at the moment when the sun was going behind the ridge, he managed to notice, in the depths of the forest, almost on the horizon line, there is a figure without movement, smooth, as if he is watching. He blinked 3 times and checked the lens, and he swears the figure remained standing even when he turned away and looked again. He shouted down, "Hey, there's someone down there!" While the others were getting up, the figure disappeared, and, as Steve said later, "She didn't leave. She didn't move away. She just disappeared. It's like I just stopped seeing her." The next day, the area near the stream was closed to the public. The official reason is high humidity and potential ground movement. But not a single volunteer went there again. Even the locals, who knew every turn, kept their distance. When Todd Clay emerged from the woods, Jason said he didn't just look disoriented, he didn't recognize the place he'd returned to. He circled the car as if checking to see if it was really the same parking lot. Then he repeated several times, "You said you'd be here, but you were on the other side. I heard you talking, just not from here." He was wearing the same clothes as in the morning, a Columbia jacket, old hunting pants, a vest. Only the pants were all covered in dried mud, and the jacket was torn in places, as if he had been crawling or clinging. There were no shoes. His legs were scratched, but there was almost no blood. But his hands were covered in blood, and not his. Already at the Sapphire Bay outpatient clinic, they did an express analysis. The blood was human, but the blood group did not match. Neither his nor his brother's. Later in the report, they indicated the wording. The source of the biomaterial has not been established, not entered into the database. Todd, as soon as he came to his senses, returned again and again to the same phrase. He knew how I spoke. He repeated my words, but not right away. When asked who, he didn't answer. He just shook his head. Then he asked for a pen. He drew something strange on a piece of paper. Schematically, 2 trees. Between them, there is something like a silhouette. And the caption, "Not he, but like him." The experts didn't pay any attention to it, considering it to be nonsense due to stress. But Jason later confirmed his brother heard his voice in the forest several times, words that he definitely didn't say, but which seemed to come from him. In the morning, when volunteers and dog handlers began to comb the area again, they found 2 strange areas. The first, behind a rock ridge 1.5 miles from the car, where, according to them, a person without shoes could not pass. There is a dry trace of blood on the stone, small not spread. Nearby is a crumpled branch, as if someone had leaned on it. But further on, there are no traces, no trash, no path. Second, in a ravine at the eastern edge of the stream, the dogs refused to go down there. One of the volunteers, having gone down, felt a strong smell, not of decay, but of something between metal and warm plastic, like a heated device body. He didn't go down. He came back and said, "No animal smells like that. This is not a forest." A couple of hours later, a ranger went down there with instruments. No signals, no traces, but the device recorded an inexplicable electromagnetic oscillation at a frequency that matched the first model radios of 1982. They were taken out of use 20 years ago, but the signal was coming from a point where no one used a radio. The questions kept coming. Later, when Todd had come to his senses a little, he said, "I walked, and everything was as usual. And then, as if I had already been here, everything was the same branches, the same stones, but from a different angle." Pause. "It was like I was walking in circles, not because I was wandering, because someone was leading me there. And he knew how you'd talk. He was copying it, and he knew I would go." From this moment on, the case ceases to be simply a lost hunter. There was something in the forest that knew the route, knew voices, and it knew how to lead a person back, not there. On the morning of October 5th, a day after the incident, searchers marked the area near the creek where Todd said he heard a voice and tried to get to his car. They expected to find a jumble of tracks, a common occurrence when disoriented. Instead, they found a single trail that didn't match Todd's version. On the wet ground, closer to the northern slope, where the soil is loose and holds tracks for up to 3 days, they found a straight line of barefoot tracks, 12 prints. All of them were from the left foot, clear, deep, as if the person had been walking with weight, leaning slightly forward. The measurement showed the foot length to be 10 inches, approximately corresponds to Todd's height. Only the steps are positioned incorrectly. The distance between them is too even. The angle of the toe does not change. And the main thing is that all the prints are directed in one direction, but lead to a closed area. There is an entry point, exit point. No. It was as if a man was walking, making a circle, and disappeared. Investigator Marvin Dean, a former hunter and veteran of the Sheriff's Department, was the first to voice what others had only thought. "That's not how you walk. That's not human." It's like someone copied the movement, but didn't understand how the gait should change. The next day, the area was fenced off, and they started looking for possible approaches around it. Not a single additional trace, not an animal, not another person, as if no one else had ever entered there. But what happens next is even stranger. When one of the volunteers tried to follow the same route where the tracks were, after 5 steps, he sank into the clay up to his knees. The boot remained in the ground. According to measurements, the soil layer there is unstable, and it is impossible to move. But the tracks are laid out perfectly in the center, where it is impossible to go. After that, the group went uphill to the Old Forest Road, in the direction from which the second flashlight allegedly came. There they found a stone with a single scratch on it, like from a knife drawn sideways, thin, long, clear, and on it there is a faint coating of fresh coal. There's nothing nearby, just a thin thread from an old hood. Cotton, rough, clearly not modern. Later, when analyzing Todd's testimony, another point came to light. He said that he heard someone walking behind him, but at that moment, he was standing still. The steps were rhythmic, as if they were repeating his own. When I took a breath, a step. When I stopped, a pause. I even tried to cheat, to walk out of step, but it immediately got confused, as if it was trying to catch up. The service psychologist wrote down this phrase verbatim because he had heard something similar before in 1985 in a neighboring district from a guy who lost his partner while hunting. Then the case was closed as an accident. But in both cases, the same thing sounded. He repeated, but belatedly. And also, I heard someone say my name. It was just like learning to do it. This is no longer just a coincidence. This is a pattern. Traces that lead to nowhere, movements that are too smooth, and the steps that are delayed are as if they are copying, but do not understand why. By midday on October 5th, the creek area was closed off. Only one route was left, along the old clearing along the southern slope. The dogs were also brought there. A second pass by handler Phil Thorne with the shepherd Maddie became the starting point for the next turn. The dog walked confidently to a certain place, a small rise overgrown with horsetail. This is where, according to Todd, he went when he heard Jason but could not find him. At the 8th meter of the rise, Maddie stopped abruptly, sniffed the air, and sat down. She didn't lie down, didn't growl. She sat up, a sign that the dog will not go further, but does not feel threatened. Thorne gave the command, "Forward." She sat down again. He tried to go around the area on the left. Same reaction. On the right, there is no passage, windfall, and a stream. In the end, the dog stayed put. He went back, and one of the volunteers, a local farmer named Glenn Hardy, went ahead alone. A minute later, he called out to the others, "Hey, there seems to have been someone here." On the soft coniferous litter are fresh prints of bare feet. This time, both of them. Different sizes. The first pair is about 10 inches, as before. The second one is a little smaller, perhaps a teenage leg. They walked in parallel, in the same direction, and they ended abruptly at the beginning of an old clearing where a ravine begins. Glenn came closer and stopped. In his words, "I didn't know what stopped me. I just stood up and couldn't go on. And then the smell, very faint but familiar, burnt plastic, like wires when they melt, and also like an old tent. That smell, you know, when fabric has been lying around for a couple of decades and has absorbed moisture. It smelled old." Jason smelled the same scent as he got closer, the same associative response. "That's what my father's tent smelled like. We spent the night in it in 91. It was burned down in 92. I remember that smell clearly. It's unmistakable. It was here." Todd, hearing this, stood up, walked towards the site, and stopped 10 feet away, held his breath, and he whispered, "I smelled it when I was walking back. It was right after I thought I heard you. I stopped, and the smell was there, stronger." The psychologist who observed the brothers noted that olfactory memory is one of the most stable. If several people independently record the same smell in the same place, it is not a hallucination. This is a trace. Later, another clue was found in this area. There is a barely visible imprint on the moss, something between a sole and a soft foot, without a clear pattern, but with depressed phalanges. The shape is not like a human, but not like an animal either. The technician called it a model, as if someone had tried to imitate a footprint but hadn't figured out exactly how the foot was constructed. By smell, the devices didn't register anything, but Maddie, returning to the zone, walked around it twice. The dog, who had served in the search and rescue team for 3 years, refused to go there, even under command. The next morning, one of the volunteers suggested setting up a camera to record movement. It is this solution that will lead to the following discovery. Observer at 9 feet, where, logically, no one could stand, but the recording is there. By the evening of October 6th, volunteers had installed 3 hunting cameras on trees along the perimeter of the area where the dog refused to go. They were set up as standard infrared motion sensor, recording in the dark, filming for 30 seconds. The cameras are autonomous, without transmitting a signal. They go off and write to an SD card. 2 of them recorded nothing during the night. The third one worked. Once. At 3:47 in the morning, according to the logs, movement was detected at the top of the frame. And this is important because the camera was set up at 8.5 feet, with the angle of the camera slightly downwards. The area was just trees and low bushes. The video is only 9 seconds long. At the 4th second, there is movement in the upper corner of the frame. Something covers part of the lens, then recedes. Next comes a barely noticeable shift of the foliage downwards and to the side, as if something soft is sliding or falling. And at the very end, the frame freezes on a light spot between the branches, reminiscent of a face, but without sharpness. No details, just a pale oval against the background of darkness. A comparative analysis of the frames showed that the object was approximately 9 feet above the ground. That is, taller than a human being, even if you stand on your toes. And there were no ledges, no snags, not a single branch to stand on. Later, when searchers examined the area, they found a broken branch just above head height. And there's a stain on it, slightly sticky to the touch but almost odorless. Sent for analysis. Composition undetermined. No protein, no animal organics. On a mundane level, it looks like a mixture of sweat and dust, but without DNA. One of the technicians looking at the frame noted, "The camera angle didn't allow for the bird or the animal to be captured. It was a background that didn't work. Someone, or something, was standing in front of the lens, right at face height, and either it hung or He didn't finish. When they showed this to Todd, he watched the footage and froze. And then he said, "It just looked at you, silently, from above. And you don't hear it coming. You just start to feel like you're looking in the wrong place." He described how, when he heard footsteps behind him, he did not immediately turn around, because the sense of danger came from above, not from behind. And when he suddenly raised his head, there was nothing, only bushes. And now, a detail that no one noticed right away. On the same camera, 10 minutes before the movement, the recording captured a barely audible sound similar to a quiet repetition. 3 short words, a whisper, distorted by the wind. But when the sound was cleared, the expert said, "First, Jason. Second, illegible. Third, Jason." This is the name of the youngest brother, the one who did not enter the forest after the incident, the one who was standing by the car, and the one whose voice Todd said he heard from another part of the forest, although he didn't call. Means, or someone knew the name, or someone repeated it, or copied, but I didn't fully understand how it was done. The next day, October 7th, after analyzing the night footage from the cameras, the volunteers decided to install another one, a little deeper into the forest, in the area where they had previously found strange tracks. The very segment where the soil was loose, but on it lay a perfectly even row of prints. The camera was fixed at the level of a person's waist, directed strictly at the center of the gap between the trees where any movements should have taken place. The check was scheduled for the next morning. The file turned out to be short, only 18 seconds. The recording began at 2:11 a.m. The camera recorded movement, but on the video, nothing happens at all. Forest, trees, fog, everything is static, not a single wind, not a sound, just the standard noise of filming, and everything would be fine if not for the phrase of the technician who looked at the footage twice, then in slow motion. You don't see movement until you know it's there. At the 5th second, one sheet shifts on the right side of the frame. It doesn't sway, it doesn't flutter in the wind. He turns around, smoothly, as if someone was unfolding it with effort, then silence again. At the 8th second, the reflection of light on the trunk of a distant tree changes. Very weak, as if someone passed by without entering the frame, but casting a shadow. And at the 13th second, the camera moves down, half an inch. There were no external influences. The camera is fixed tightly, checked, and then the frame freezes. The last 5 seconds, nothing. In itself, such a record might seem like a mistake. But when Todd was shown the video, he immediately pointed to frame 5, even before the technician's comment. Said, "Right here he was, standing on the right. He didn't move. He just stared." When asked who he meant, he did not answer, just turned away. And then he added, "You don't notice it's there because it behaves like a forest." After watching the video, one of the search participants, a former survey engineer, suggested checking the camera for hidden reflections. They used a laser grid, and on the second scan, they found a slight distortion of shape at a height of 6 feet. It was as if there was an object in the frame that did not reflect the light, but distorted the geometry of the background. In simple terms, something was there, but it was not reflected in the matrix. This area was found to be unstable for visual monitoring after analysis. Words from the conclusion: spatial heterogeneity, whatever that means. From a technical point of view, the camera is not faulty. With the human one, she recorded an absence that moved like a presence. When asked how he reacted to all this, Jason said, "I don't believe in fairy tales. But if the camera shows emptiness and the brother says that someone was there, that means someone just didn't want to be seen." And here is where the last element comes in. The next camera, installed closer to the parking lot on the same night at 3:04, catches the sound. One short, squeezed, wait, female voice, no emotion, but not spoken near a microphone, but as if inside the device itself. We checked all the cameras. Only one recorded this word, and only once. The morning of October 8th was unusually quiet at the camp. The search party had folded up to the perimeter, and Todd's brother, Jason, had stayed overnight at the campsite with 3 volunteers and 1 ranger on duty. No new signals had come in, but on this particular morning and at this particular campsite, everything changed. The fire had been lit in the evening, the usual practice, heating, lighting, a way to keep the group in one place. There were 4 of us. At some point, around 4:30 in the morning, Jason got up to go to the car for water. He returned a couple of minutes later, and he saw that there were 5 people sitting by the fire. Nobody stood up, nobody came up, nobody said a word, but the 5th man was there, in full gear, uniform, cap. The light from the fire made it impossible to see the face, but the figure was clear. On his knees is a walkie-talkie, an old square one, a model from the 90s. Jason stopped and asked, "Who are you?" There was no response. One of the volunteers, Tom Hudson, later said, "I looked at him, and it was as if I understood. He has been here for a long time. He is simply silent, but he is one of us." And then all 3 began to review the recordings from the night. And here something strange became clear. None of them could remember exactly when this man sat down by the fire. We didn't see him approach. We didn't hear any footsteps, didn't recognize the face. And when Jason suggested simply counting the people, it became clear. No one knew this man. He stood up, didn't say goodbye, just walked away into the darkness, and he was never seen again. Only a token remained where he had sat, metallic, shabby. It has the following initials engraved on it. Jap service number, does not match current ones, and the date on the back is 1979. These are the same initials that were on the cover of the notebook found in Scott Laney's car in the previous story. The same name, John A. Peterson, is listed as missing in Gunnison in October 1979. He also worked in the service. He also went on night duty. He didn't come back either. Who the man by the fire was, no one knows. There are no logs. There was no signal. Name, not listed in the system. But he sat. He looked at the fire. It was as if he knew where to look at night. And what? You shouldn't look back. So that's the story. These were all the official pieces of evidence listed in the case. If you've ever experienced something similar, on a hike, on a trail, out in the woods, share it in the comments. Maybe not with you, but with someone you knew. Sometimes small details can open up something bigger. And if this story stuck with you, save the video. Add it to a playlist. Come back to it later. Sometimes the full picture only makes sense the second or third time. And if you feel like someone's hiding something here, say it. Cases like this often stay alive only because someone refuses to forget.